Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and his pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. Continuing from last night's speech, and we were speaking about the concept of Qurb al-Faraa'id. This is a very important principle, and if we understand this concept and principle, many questions can be then answered by default. It's important to understand it. I'll do my best, and it has been misunderstood in many books too. Qurb al-Faraa'id and Qurb al-Nawafil, they can be translated as proximity through obligation and proximity through recommendation. Fara'id meaning obligations, Nawafil, the mustahabbat, the nafil, as we have. However, one shouldn't think that Fara'id and the Nawafil are referring to the wajibat and the mustahabbat. It's another reality that is referred to by these two stations of spirituality. That's okay, yes, thank you. It was okay, yes. Okay. Sorry. When one wants to classify one's free will and the degree to which one's free will is absorbed and annihilated in Allah's will, there are 4 or 5 different classes that result. We want to see the degree to which one's will is absorbed and is annihilated and therefore on a par with Allah's will. We have to go through this classification before Qurb al-Faraa'id becomes apparent. Sometimes people like me and you, we're at liberty with our free will. Sometimes we sin, sometimes we do makruh actions, sometimes we do mubah actions, sometimes we do mustahab actions, and sometimes we do the wajibat. Here, the free will here is at liberty. It's not really absorbed in Allah's will. The level of Iman, or Islam rather, is a minimum, and therefore sins sometimes emanate from us, and sometimes the wajibat. One step higher, where one acquires some degree of faith, one sins less, or maybe not even, they don't sin at all. But they commit makruh actions, they commit mubah actions, they commit mustahab actions, and they commit the wajibat. Then the degree of faith increases, one's taslim, submission before Allah's will increases, and then one reaches a level where not only do they not do any sins, but they don't do any makruh actions either. Ayatollah Hassan Zada Omri said, I was with my ustad, my mentor, Allama Tabatabai, for 17 years. This is Ayatollah Hassan Zada saying this. For 17 years I was with him. I never saw him do one makruh action. This is a very high degree of taslim now. Submission. The absorption, annihilation in Allah's will has increased now. then one only does mubah actions, or mustahab actions, or the wajibat, depending on the action. But there's no sins emanating from one anymore. There are no makruh actions. And then one reaches a level where not only do they have taslim, because with submission there may or may not be satisfaction accompanied with it, but one becomes totally satisfied now in all actions. This is a station of rida, satisfaction before Allah. And they reach a stage where they only do action to action, moment to moment, either mustahab actions or wajib actions. See, I just want you to appreciate the degrees here. I have to go through these preliminaries before we get to Qurb al-Faraa'id and what this means. They either do mustahab actions or they do wajib actions. There's still an I though. The I is still there. In the traditions, in the sacred traditions, in the ahadith al-Qudsi, here, in this degree, where people only do either the mustahab or the wajib actions, they call it Qurb al-Nawafil. They've reached such a proximity to Allah, it's either mustahab or the wajibat now. Then Allah speaks in relation to these people and says, Kuntu. This is Allah saying, this is a sacred tradition. Kuntu sam'ahu. I am there, those people who have acquired this degree of proximity, but there's still an I though. There are some traces of the I present. But it's only the mustahabat and the wajibat they're occupied with, moment to moment during their lives. And Allah says, Kuntu I sam'ahu. Allah is saying that I am their hearing. Alladhi yasma'u bih. By means of which they hear. Or وَكُنْتُ بَصَرَهُ. I, Allah, I am their seeing, by means of which they see. So here, Allah is the means, is still an instrument for the person. The person still has an eye. There are still remnants of the eye there. Allah is still an instrument, a means still. A means through which they hear, they see, they speak. But it's they who are seeing, hearing and speaking. It's not Allah. They are doing it. But they're doing it through this means. These are very delicate clauses. If you don't understand, I have to sometimes repeat it. So here Allah is the means. There's still an I. But Allah is the means through which they see, hear, and so on and so forth. Moment to moment, action to action, and it's either the mustahabat they do or the wajibat. But finally, there's a stage where the proximity is so high that all they do is out of wujub, but not the canonical wujub. Because if it was the canonical wujub, they only do the wajibat. Well, the previous stage would have been higher, because they do the wajibat and the mustahabat. So here in Qurb al-Faraa'id, all they do is out of necessity, out of wujub, but it's not a canonical wujub here. This has to be opened up. Here, there is no I anymore. Here, one's will is totally absorbed and annihilated in Allah's will. Here, Allah isn't the means. The servant becomes the means. And Allah sees, talks, acts through this means. Now look at the status of the Imams now. The reason why we're in love with them. Some people with Qurb al-Faraa'id, which means proximity through the Faraa'id, the wujub, but not the canonical wujub, they've reached a level. There's no I, they are pure instruments. They are pure means through which Allah sees, talks, hears, walks, and so on and so forth. Here there is no I, because the servant's I has been totally annihilated. It's on a par with Allah's will now. Their will is Allah's will. It's in unity with one another. And look at how the secret traditions now describe these people. Look at the difference. Kana, Allah says. He is Sam'i. The servant is my hearing. Alladhi asma'u bih, through which I hear. But He is my hearing. He is my seeing, through which I see. And we have many other traditions which highlight this concept of being annihilated in Allah's will. One of them is quite a long one. I'll just, towards the end, it says, Allah says again, وَمَنْ أَحَبَّنِي أَشَغَنِي. Whoever likes me will love me. وَمَنْ أَشَقْتُهُ. No, I think I missed something else. Then it says, وَمَنْ أَشَغَنِي أَشَقْتُهُ. Allah says, whoever loves me, I will love them. وَمَنْ أَشَقْتُهُ. And whoever I, Allah, love, قَتَلْتُهُ. I'll kill them. It's not a physical killing though. It's the killing of all traces of the ego now. The grounds are being prepared. For what? وَمَنْ قَتَلْتُهُ. Whoever I kill, I, Allah, kill. فَعَلَيَّ دِيَّتُهُ. Their blood money is upon me, Allah. وَمَنْ عَلَيَّ دِيَّتُهُ. And whoever's blood money is upon me, Allah, أَنَا دِيَّتُهُ. I am the blood money. You see again, where once all trace of the ego annihilated, one's will on a par with Allah's will, and then one becomes a pure means through which Allah acts through. Now this is Qurb al-Faraa'id, where one's will is totally absorbed, making one a pure means through which now Allah acts. So whatever such a servant does, it's out of necessity, not the canonical sense. That doesn't make sense here yet. It's Allah acting. This is a different realm. Don't say, he did this mubah action, he did this mustahab action. Mubah, mustahab, these things are for you who are confined to this realm. The I is dominating. For them, everything was wajib. Not wajib in the canonical sense. In the existential sense, it was, they had to, it wasn't them, there was no I. Allah is acting. For us, some things are mubah, for them it's wajib, not in the canonical sense. Sorry for repeating this, but don't want anyone to misunderstand. For us, some things were mustahab, for them it's wajib, not in the canonical sense. For us, some actions are wajib, for them it's wajib, not in the canonical sense. For us, it was in the canonical sense, not for them. But here there's a similarity, they're both wajib. But that wajib and that wajib is a world of difference. Then there are some things that we do that are makruh or sins. Before I say this, here, what I say on the Imam, I just want to give you different perspectives of different scholars. I'm not saying this is it, but I think it's important for people to understand that Islam, there are many different understandings to even the articles of faith. There's not just one understanding. The theologians understand Allah one way, the Urafa another way, totally different. And it has a lot of implications. The theologians may understand heaven and hell one way, the Urafa another way, totally different. And they're both right, but they're different. In relation to the Mi'raj, there may be differences. In relation to Raj'at, there may be differences. In every article of faith, there may be differences. And I'm not saying who's right or wrong, but since some perspectives haven't come out yet, in the English language, of course, the Farsi and Arabic language, I'm sure these discussions, I felt it may be of some use to the English-speaking world. So, but by no means I don't want you to panic or even think that this is, whack or anything. But I think it's good for you to understand. When I was 15 or 16 in Manchester, there was no Rouhani then. And my Farsi was very weak. Then the first Rouhani who came was speaking on natural balagha. And I would go and listen, because the first time I would see a Rouhani, it was like an addict, you're looking for someone to tell you about your deen. You find one, you do anything to get there. And he would speak in a very difficult language with these terms. I would just sit down and maybe I would understand 5%. Without exaggerating. But I would listen. The words, everything he would say. 20 years later, in Qurb, we're studying modules in certain subjects, and everything begins clicking. So we don't have to understand everything now. You have to give it time sometimes. Don't rush through knowledge. Has to be digested properly. Knowledge isn't like fast food. It's like fast food, it may have its side effects too. Knowledge is to be digested over time. Knowledge is building, self-builds you. If knowledge is acquired in haste and it doesn't build you, it becomes Ijabul Akbar. The major veil. Don't rush with knowledge. Don't play around with it. Very slowly. But don't be scared of it either. Now, there are some things which are makruh, which we do, or sins. Now, do those who have Qurb al-Faraa'id do makruh actions or sins? You say no. Why? Because they have no eye, first of all, so it doesn't even apply to them. Allah is acting through them. But then the question comes, there are certain actions that they've done. Those who have acquired the station of Qurb al-Faraa'id, that if we were to do, we being people below that station of Qurb al-Faraa'id, it would be deemed haram. Like having more than 4 wives. Here, something has to be explained. Even in relation to makruh actions, there are some things which are makruh. For example, closing your eyes during salat. But that makruh action is overruled if by closing your eyes, your attention and focus of the heart is enhanced. Makruhs can be overruled. especially the makruh, which is only discussing more or less rewards, because makruh has two dimensions to it. One of them, it merely means there's less reward to it. But if you're doing a makruh, let's say, with a certain divine intention, which would increase your faith, then that karahat will be overruled. But some makruh actions, it's because it's intrinsically bad, that action. No, that can't be overruled that easily. And then with the sins are sins, but sometimes, for me and you, sins are overruled. For example, if we're dying, then we're allowed to consume pork, for example, if that's the only thing which is available and only to the extent that is necessary. But that's for me and you. The question here is, there are some actions which those who have Qurb al-Faraa'id have been attributed to, like having more than 4 wives. How do we explain that? Here it said that this is Allah acting through them. They're mere instruments. If there's no I present, you can't attribute this to them. There is no I. And Allah, because of X, Y, Z reason, in such a political or socio-political climate, or for whatever other reason, Allah is acting Allahly through these people in a particular way, but they don't have an I. Don't attribute it to them. And this is how we have to understand with the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. When they bring the dilemma of why did he have this many wives, well, you have to understand Qurb al-Faraa'id. You can't just give a one-liner to them. It's only through understanding Qurb al-Faraa'id these kind of questions can be answered. But then, the way the scholars from old have decided to explain it, they say there are certain actions which are specific to the Holy Prophet or the Imams. For example, for us, Salatul Layl is mustahab. For them, it's wajib, but not in the canonical sense. You see? So they say, look at the language they use. They say these, and the Sunnis have it too. A very famous Sunni scholar called Suyuti, in one book, he brings 1,000 actions which are specific to the Holy Messenger. 1,000. We only know of more than 4 wives, Salatul Layl, maybe 2 or 3 others, that's it. He mentioned 1,000, now the accuracy I'm not sure about, but and I'm not sure how they explain it, but it has to go through Qurb al-Faraa'id. That has to be understood. Now, Ibn Arabi has explained this Qurb al-Faraa'id and its difference with Qurb al-Nawafil in a very delicate manner, very, very eloquently, very precisely. Now, Ibn Arabi, there is some controversy, and Ayatollah Sistani Hafadahullah has said that the teachings of Ibn Arabi is not on a par with Islam, and he's right. There's no question about that. It doesn't mean it's not on a par, it's 100% wrong. He's not saying it's not 100%. It's different to Islam, the real Islam. And today in the houses in Qom, they teach many books, and the ustads from various areas in the books of Ibn Arabi. There's no problem there. No one's book is on a par with Islam, not only Ibn Arabi, but with Ibn Arabi there has been some contention. The next point is, was he a Sunni or a Shia? Imam Khomeini, Ayatollah Hassan Zada Omuli, Ayatollah Jawadi Omuli, but especially Ayatollah Hassan Zada Omuli, they've proved he was a Shia. Now this is a historical debate. Ibn Arabi has 700 to 800 works. Some people look at one or two and they look at translations, they come with a conclusion. That's not the way. You have to go to the scientists of the field. In fiqh, go to the scientists in fiqh, the experts, the maraji. Is someone who is an expert or a marja in fiqh, do they by default become an expert and marja in aqa'id or philosophy or akhlaq or irfan? No, not necessarily. Yes, if in aqa'id someone is saying there's two Allahs, yes, the marja can come because there is a red line in fiqh and aqa'id when they cross, and below that red line the marja can say, no, if you say two Allahs, what you're doing is haram, you're najis, and so on and so forth. But these are just a few things, it's a minimum. Someone who's a marja is an expert of the Sharia, and in relation to all do's and don'ts, you go to them. And this is a rational principle. If I have diabetes, my rationality tells me you go to the specialist in diabetes who is most learned. If I have a common cold, it doesn't matter who I go to, because everyone will prescribe the same thing. But with cancer, with diabetes, no. The regimens differ. Or the regimes differ, rather. Here, rationality says go to that specialist who is most knowledgeable. And if it's within one's means, one goes and benefits. Now, there may be a heart specialist, there may be a cancer specialist. I have diabetes, though. I go to him. I believe he's the most knowledgeable, or at least he's one of the three most knowledgeable. Now, which one of the three is the most? I don't know. I can go to either. But they're experts in the Sharia. And they've studied fiqh and matters of the Sharia for more than 40, 50 years. It's not a matter of we blindly following them. That's not a good term. And it's not good to say that, like animals, we follow these people. That's not good. Please don't use that language. It's a rational thing. In medicine, I go to the most knowledgeable. In this field, the most knowledgeable. In the Sharia, I go to him. Respect that decision. I made it with my own rationality. I may change if I feel another one has become more learned. Now someone has, now acknowledge that this person is an expert in the Sharia. Does that by default mean they're an expert in Irfan? No. Yes, if you're Imam Khomeini, yes. Because in addition to being a mujtahid in his early 20s in fiqh and usul, he was a mujtahid in philosophy, akhlaq, and irfan in his 20s before even marrying at 27. No, that's somewhat important. If he was alive in all matters, in irfan, akhlaq, he would be the place to go. In irfan today, no, we don't need to go to the Maharajas, except if it's in those areas where halal and haram is there. But in 99% of irfan, it's irfani principles at stake. We have to understand them. Now, if a Maharaja says, let's say Ibn Arabi is a kafir, it becomes very difficult then. Because the Maharaja has entered into the particularities now. The point is, the Maharaja They don't have the jurisdiction to enter into the particularities. They only give the general principles. The duty-bound has to make that call at the end. Although they can advise, but it's not bounding or binding upon us. If someone says Ibn Arabi is a kafir, there's no need to panic. Certainly should be disrespectful to the marja. Marjas aren't toys to be played around with. The Sharia dimension of Islam is linked with the existence of these noble people. You attack them or mock them, you're attacking and mocking Islam. It's a Sharia dimension. Okay, it's the primary, elementary dimension, but it's the dimension which everyone from birth starts with. But my point is this, that if a marja says the respect has to be there, but I believe someone else in Irfan is a'lam, here I would refer to them. And then we ask them, that marja, for example, why is he a kafir? He says, because he believes in X and Y. He's a kafir. We go to the one who's spent 40 or 50 years doing Irfan with the proper ustads, studying their textbooks. Irfan is a science. It has textbooks to read. This is theoretical Irfan, I don't mean the Irfan, practical Irfan, no. That's another issue. The textbooks of Irfan, it's a science. Someone may have not have read it with the Imam Khomeini has said this. When he was asked why do many people say X or Y is a kafir, Imam says because they haven't read the books with the proper ustads. Now if someone says Ibn Arabi is a kafir, but they haven't had that knowledge, experience, and someone who studied 40 or 50 years of Irfan says no, that person hasn't understood what Ibn Arabi was saying, here the duty bound is obliged to follow the most learned in Irfan. To see what they're saying, at least. Rationality guides us there. Now it doesn't matter if Ibn Arabi was a Sunni or a Shia here. He was a Muslim. I'm saying it's a historical debate. Ayatollah Hassan Zada has proved it though. Imam believed in it. Ayatollah Jawadi only believes it. They don't believe he was Shia. But that's not something I want to really... In one of his works, when he wants to differentiate between Qurb al-Faraa'id and Qurb al-Nawafil, he says this. And those who have paid attention to the beginning, this should sink in, inshallah. فَفِي الْفَرْض, in relation to proximity through fara'id, through obligation, ubudiyatul idrar, they're obliged in relation to obligations. In Qurb al-Faraa'id, they are, those servants, they're obliged, constrained. If they don't use the word compelled, but they're obliged before obligation. Now this obligation not in the canonical sense though, it means all actions. The idea is though, this ubudiyya, which means servitude, is istirari. Servitude is obliged upon them. Servitude includes the mubah, the mustahabat, everything. But it's a notion of being obliged upon them, constrained upon them. وَهِيَ الْأَصْلِيَّةِ, and this is of primary importance. وَفِي الْفَرْعِ, that which is of secondary importance, وَهُوَ النَّفْلِ, of a secondary degree, it's the Qurb al-Nawafil, which ubudiyatul ikhtiyar, servitude isn't idtirari and obliged upon them, it's ikhtiyari, it's optional. There's an I, the I chooses. Where there's an I, there's an option. But in Qurb al-Faraa'id, there was no I. There was no option because of that high degree they reached. It was Allah acting through them. Whereas here they are acting. They have an I. And then he says, فَفِي أَدَاءِ الْفَرْضِ, in relation to accomplishing the Qurb al-Faraa'id, أَنْتَ لَهُ, you are in unity with Allah. You're for Him, holy. You're in unity with Him. The idea that Allah is working through you. أَنْتَ لَهُ. وَفِي النَّفْلِ, but in Qurb al-Nawafil, أَنْتَ لَكَ, you are in unity with yourself. You're working for yourself. For example, if we want to give a man and woman example, sometimes the man is for the woman wholly, completely infatuated. Whatever she wants, he'll do. It's not about him anymore. She says so, I'll do this. Everything is her. But sometimes you're good with her, but it's not for her. It's for her cuisine or for her services. You're doing it for yourself ultimately. There's still an I. Whereas in the first one, it was all her. Then he says, وَحُبُّهُ, Allah's love, إِيَّاكَ, for you the servant. مِنْ حَيْثُ مَا أَنْتَ لَهُ, Allah's love for you. When you are in unity with Him, you're all for Him. أَعْظَمُ is greater. وَأَشَدُّ is more stronger. Min hubbihi, than Allah's love, iyaka, for you, min haythuma anta laka, when you are doing it for yourself, when you are in unity with yourself. That was a very important part. Okay. Now, going back to that tradition last night on Kamin Nabiyun, how many prophets are there? The Holy Messenger replied, 124,000. This 124,000, we said, has an external meaning and it has esoteric dimensions. The external meaning means, yes, from Prophet Adam alayhi salam to our Holy Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There were 124,000 prophets. And there's no reason why there's no need to negate that. Sometimes there were 5 prophets sent to one person, there were 10 prophets sent to one family, there were 70 prophets sent to one tribe, and so we have a lot of those. But we said that people have acquired this station of Qurb al-Faraa'id, and now we've explained what it is. This is Allah speaking. This 124,000, it's Allah is speaking through the Holy Messenger. And in the same way that the verses of the Holy Quran, as we alluded to last night, has infinite number of dimensions, so do the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt. But there's one thing one has to be careful here. When we go into the esoteric dimensions of either the verses of the Quran or the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, this is called ta'wil. It's used in contrast to tafsir. In tafsir, we have to go through the occasions of revelation, study the context, and through proper standards and principles, explain the verse externally. It's in tafsir that if you make your own story up, that becomes your own personal opinion and it's haram. In ta'wil though, 2 things have to be borne in mind. One is, only the ma'soom can give the esoteric dimension of verses or traditions of the Ahlul Bayt. However, and we have many traditions where they have done so, and that's 100% for us. Other than the Ma'soom though, Imam Khomeini says, there's no harm in digging and exploring. It has to be through the correct principles of ta'wil, but you have to at the end say, maybe this is one esoteric dimension. There has to be a maybe. You can't say it 100%. Unless, like last night's example, the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt have referred to something similar, you're using it with another tradition or verse which uses the same language. Otherwise, we always say, muhtamalun. It's possible that. But Imam says no one has the right to stop you to explore. It's just you need the knowledge to go through the correct steps and standards in that exploration. It's a science at the end of the day. You can't say things willy-nilly. This 124,000, the only reason I had the audacity to say this on the member, even though it may not be convincing to me 100%, is because someone important has said this. Mullah Hadi Sabzawari has said this in one of his books. And we have traditions which back his conclusion. All right. This has stopped us again at a critical time, yes. So this has to go until tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah. If I would request you to be
I think out of respect for his Muhammad wa alihi.